Hello, my name is Alicia David, and I will be presenting Enduring Ephemeralism, Relationships, and Nature. Nature will move on. Nature will always move on. However, why does that take away the meaning of what is done now? Certainly, in the future, the destruction left behind will be erased in the march of time. Yet, how does that take away the importance of the lives now? The period of existence does not denote a difference in importance. While nature will always endure, the individual lives that make up that nature should not be cast aside. In contemporary society, there is a disharmony and imbalance between humans, animals, and nature. This brings to mind the idea of commodification, the action or process of treating something as a mere commodity. An example of this is the cut flower industry, which is worth billions. Yet all it leaves behind is cut flowers that die, chemical waste, and water waste. This is why this is an example for exploitation and why we need to fix our relationships with nature. My search for this is done through the use of vases, which hold a historical similarity. Historically, vases were used to carry water and were an integral part of human society. Yet now, much like many flowers, they are often used as decoration only. Thus, throughout my work, I want to create seeds to attach to already existent thoughts or planted for later thought that invoke the rethinking of relationships that expands through curiosity and exploration, involving the nature and human mind. Art Nouveau and Deco are invested uses of floral form and imagery on forms recognizable as being historically functional, and yet now currently decorative in a throwaway society. Throughout my childhood, there were fixtures around the house and other buildings that influenced my thought process and art. However, my pieces are not functional and are currently focused on clay for the earth, which all things must come from. Another influence is Katie Spragg, who has a focus on time and place. Along with memories, she uses delicate plants, weeds, normally considered pests, yet she uses them to demonstrate resilience, speaking on the human propensity to label, while proclaiming the weeds as important as any other plant and any other living being or any other being at all. She also uses clay clods in some of her art, and they represent earth. Her monochromatic format veers the eye toward the form of her plants instead of the color. While there are many pieces of both her and my art that coincide, she has a focus on specific areas and time while having an entirely monochromatic palette. There is also a focus on plants considered weeds, while my pieces focus more on decorative plants used as wallflowers, along with darker clay bodies, and a focus on the entirety of nature throughout the use of plants. Rococo is reasoning and knowledge, freedom, happiness, reached through balance, and the loss of commodification, and thus cohesion. Working together leads to a comprehension and clarity, thus knowledge and freedom with happiness. Rococo also focused on the asymmetrical curved forms and shapes seen in flowering plant depictions. However, these ornate forms are in reliefs and carvings and different from my fully round objects that focus more on the cohesion of human life and actual plants. Monet once said, "The techniques change, but art remains the same. It is the free and emotional interpretation of nature." Reading from these words to depict nature and emphasize the importance of working in a cohesive and balanced relationship. Monet portrayed nature uninterrupted, and while I admire his effort and work to portray water lilies, my work is more focused on nature interrupted, and yet the hope to remind it that nature is everything, and thus humans are part of nature, and while we interrupt it, perhaps we can remember how we once used to work better with it. My work also works with beauty and aesthetics. Plato considered art to be veered toward the higher good, and any other form of art that did not focus on that to be dangerous. Aristotle considered the best parts of nature to create archetypes. And there are many kinds of beauty because there are many kinds of things. Immanuel Kant, beautiful due to form. Thus, following that, nature is beautiful, and you can extend that to existence as beautiful. However, personally, I emphasize the beauty capable of intersecting humanity and nature harmoniously through the lens of my own eyes. Age does not denote beauty, and neither does form. However, morally, there are simply forms that incite horror and not beauty, because there are some actions that just cannot be beautiful because they are morally wrong. However, an existence that is an existence has form and is thus beautiful. Thus, an existence that has form is beautiful, while some actions are not. My work focuses on the intersection between humanity and nature, and that humanity is a small part of a whole, and thus part of nature, no matter how currently separated. Thus, my work ends up focusing on harmony and balance, and the idea that broken relationships and the relationship that is between us and nature is not unfixable, and that we can both continue to work on the paths we have found and find new ones to work better with nature. Kintsugi, Zen, and Asian gardens influence my thoughts and processes. However, it is Ikebana that has impacted my work the most. Ikebana is the Japanese art of flower arranging and has several different schools and thoughts. The one I focus on is Sugetsu, which also has the thought that the wonder of Ikebana should be learned and shared, along with freedom of time and materials. Sugetsu also focuses on appreciation, on the asymmetrical, and that the vase is more important than simply to hold flowers, and built to extend life. In the end, both the vase and the flowers become one piece. They are not separate. The colors also represent meanings, and there is a focus on stems and leaves that is more than just the flowers. The flowers in vases are denoted by season and occasion. The water is exposed, much like the earth in my work, and both is what all rises up from. Ikebana also is suggestive of the whole of nature, humanity and nature brought together. Ikebana and Sugetsu are stricter than my thought in both color and season, and within both vases and flowers. There are many rules that I also do not follow. However, there are many theories and thoughts behind Ikebana that influence and fit within my work. From a young age, I had a focus on nature and the intersection of humanity and our influence crossing with that nature, whether it was through buildings and plants or the stars, or simply trees and the representations of plants in a more simplified format. This eventually led to my more recent exploration and searching, from where I went from mixing plants and animals and bugs to the human form, or the human-made objects crossed over with forms like mushrooms. However, the one that led me to the current path I am on is the idea of humanity as a box, and nature surrounding and compromising in a cycle. This idea eventually led to the idea of using the vase and merging nature within a vase and with outside. And my experimentation led to these small forms where I was learning how exactly I could merge those two ideas and forms together. I was also interested in this because it brought about the idea of interconnection and the breaking of boundaries and labels through the use of breaking the traditional forms of both plants and the vase. The experimentation of those small vases led to the first in my series of enduring ephemeralism, Rebirth. The rebirth consists of lotus flowers in 2 vases. The colors end up eventually as black and white, like the yin and yang, the cycle of life and reincarnation. What interested me as well is the idea that some parts of this world consider white to be death and black to be life, while other parts consider it to be the exact opposite. And it's interesting how the coinciding ideas are both different and yet harmonious, much like the ideas I wish to portray. The lotus flowers in their cycle of life both grow from and fall to the bottom of the vase, which is where the water comes from, and thus hope for a new beginning. The first piece led to these sketches where I was creating potential ideas to further form my concept behind the intersection of humanity and nature via the vessel and the ornate plants. And while they all did not make it into the eventual series I planned out, they all had thought behind it that helped me format what eventually did become the entire series. These are progress photos of several of the pieces that have ended up in my series, and I consider them important because they exemplify portions of what I want to portray: the intersection of humanity and nature. The human is working with the clay or the earth to create representations of themselves and others, connected and merging again with the nature that we never truly left. This is the current lineup before the second firing of several of the pots and the addition of color, along with the absence of the final showstopper of this series. The pieces are in the correct lineup, and we have the pair of Rebirth and Lotus life cycle, with the idea that we are separate but within the same universe and environment. Second is Bleeding Hearts, which stand for compassion, and they are pulling together both sides of the pot, thus representing that nature and being around nature and flowing with nature can heal the wounds humanity has created upon ourselves and with nature. Third is the Rose, which stands for Impossible Miracle and is named Compromise, because there is a compromise between humanity and nature existent within it, and the reminder that humanity is again part of nature. The rose is blue because that is not possible for a rose naturally, and it's something humans do to create the idea of beauty and thus also impossibility. However, the pot is slowly drained from that of a normal pot into the flower, which is growing up from it. This will be further exemplified by the rose next to it being placed upon the stem, and a gradient of color showing the draining, and then the vibrancy of the flower beneath, that is then growing through and up through the top. This piece also exemplifies the intersection because it is the moment of realization where humanity is aware that they are a part of nature and is learning to compromise to become one with nature again and break those false boundaries we ourselves put up. Fourth is the harebell, which stands for humility and gratitude and is constant. And it is that transformation pushed farther. Instead of nature requiring itself to remind humanity. It is humanity themselves who realizes and gradually grasps and transforms themselves from the vessel of humanity and into that of free and happy and harmonious human beings that are part of nature who understand that they are a small piece of the whole. Fifth is the hydrangea, which stands for a water vessel and remembrance. It is the flowers growing up into the pot who remember that that humanity exists, but again, humanity is part of nature. This then flows into the final piece of the series that has yet to be made, which is the hibiscus, and I chose the meaning for fleeting, as the vessel or pot is human, while the flowers are nature. And this is a fleeting intersection that is reminding humans that we are fleeting, but so is all the individuals around us. And to remember that this moment in time might be fleeting, but we should focus and look towards the future that is better. Furthermore, this is the culmination of the entire series, because in the end, the flowers flow out from the pot, and the pot no longer exists, and the flowers float in the air, and it is the moment where the human and the viewer does not need the pot or the vessel to represent themselves anymore, because they have become that vessel, and so they walk out of the series becoming one with nature and one with the flowers, physically and hopefully spiritually. Lighting is going to be very important because it will create atmosphere and connection and the idea of hope, along with illuminating both the dissonance between humanity and yet the ways we merge and continue to merge and fix our relationships. Thus, my work seeks to relate and remember nature, to demonstrate exploited subjects, the flower, the vases, and the light, and remind that while they are exploited, in the future we can change that relationship, and remember to be kind to each other and to this world and everything around us. The foundation of clay or earth demonstrates the lenses of my viewpoint of how earth brings forth everything on this planet and life, along with the idea for conviction for survival in all beings in the future. Thus, my work will hopefully create seeds that invoke curiosity and exploration, along with thought on our relationships between each other and everything around us, while addressing the issue of contemporary society and treatment predominantly through exploited flowers and the vase, and then moving on from there. Here is my bibliography, and while some of the sources did not show up much within my presentation, they did influence a lot of my thought processes and helped me reach the point where I have currently reached. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Have a good day.